Hi all, thank you for joining us this month for A11yTalks. Each month we get together to talk online about a variety of topics involving or related to accessibility. Please follow us on Twitter. We are A11yTalks, that's A11yTalks, or visit us at our website, A11yTalks.com, to keep apprised of upcoming sessions and speakers or any other relevant information. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube. Yes, this is the whole section where Donna goes on her shameless plugs. So come on, subscribe to our YouTubes to hear about our upcoming talks. And with that YouTube plug, I want to remind everyone it's being recorded. So with any time you're popping questions in or sharing those thoughts on Twitter or what have you, please remember that it's all public. And if you have a sense of humor like mine, let's just tuck that back in for right now. So with that, A11yTalks does seek to provide a friendly and safe environment. All my goofing aside, it's vitally important that all importants feel able to engage in a productive dialogue. We're here to learn and share and help each other grow in an atmosphere of mutual respect. So therefore, we're going to require all participants adhere to the Drupal Code of Conduct. So if you have any questions throughout today's session, please go ahead and drop them into the chat or hashtag A11yTalks on Twitter. And we're going to share those at the end of the session. All right. So with that, today we're excited to have Jill Wolters with us. She's a Web Standards Program Manager over at a California university. I bet you're warmer than I am. I'm an avid traveler, Jill. Where are you headed to next?
Oh, when I can get on a plane and it's safe, I would love to fly back to Colorado to see my family, my side of the family, or my husband's side of the family in Germany.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, I haven't been to Germany, but I love Colorado. It's one of my favorite places. All right, well, with that, Jill is going to share with us some digital accessibility success stories, started with on a Twitter, where a screen reader user reported the content barrier on the COVID-19 website. So Jill, please take it away.
Great, thank you, Donna. I'm going to share my screen here. And hopefully you can see my slide. So yes, the title of my talk today is Making a COVID-19 Site Accessible from Tweet to Action. And I'm really happy to be here today. Thank you, Donna. Thank you, Carrie and Amy June, for inviting me to speak. Again, very honored. Today's talk is based on a blog post that I wrote last year. The blog's title is A Little Bird Told Me, playing on the theme of the bird from Twitter, because the story is about a COVID-19 website that somebody tweeted about a barrier to content. And so I'll tell you about the actions taken to improve the website for better accessibility. First, a little bit about me. There we go. Again, I'm Jill Wolters. I'm from the San Francisco Bay Area, and my pronouns are she and her. And I love creating awareness about digital accessibility and consulting with website owners on how to make their websites more accessible. My accessibility awareness began when I worked at Colorado State University. I took my webmaster committee on a field trip to the campus's Assistive Technology Resource Center, where we heard a screen reader read aloud our college's homepage. And my friend and accessibility mentor, Kath Steger, also introduced a wide variety of other assistive technologies. It was an experience I'll never forget. And from that moment on, I was hooked on digital accessibility. Now I'm the Web Standards Program Manager at the University of California, San Francisco, also referred to as UCSF throughout this presentation. And I've also co-founded the Accessibility Network for California Government and Higher Ed earlier this year, along with my friend and colleague, Suzanne Levine, who is the Digital Accessibility Program Manager for the County of Marin. That's the county just north of the Golden Gate Bridge. Suzanne and I met at an accessibility supper in the Bay Area when I first moved here from Colorado about 5 years ago. I have a disclaimer for you. I'm not here on behalf of or to represent UCSF, and the website in the story also has a disclaimer because it's not considered an official UCSF website. The disclaimer reads, "This is not an official UCSF website. The opinions or statements expressed herein should not be taken as a position of or endorsement by the University of California at San Francisco. I'd like to set the tone with a quote. The power of the web is its universality. Access by everyone, regardless of disability, is an essential aspect. This quote is from Tim Berners-Lee, the director of the W3C and inventor of the World Wide Web. W3C is short for the World Wide Web Consortium. It's an international community that develops open standards, and these standards are known as the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, also known as WCAG for short. I'll repeat that second sentence of this quote because it resonates with me. Access by everyone, regardless of disability, is an essential aspect. As I wrote my COVID-19 blog post last summer about the remediation efforts, I realized the framework for my story had these three parts, these three components, and I realized I use these over and over again in a lot of my discussions with content owners about accessibility. And so I'm going to expand on these three components throughout today's presentation that I believe are very important. First one is dialogue or important conversations. The second is good faith efforts. And the third is a roadmap for continuous improvement. I found these three components offer a framework for other areas of accessibility beyond websites. For example, software purchasing, evangelizing to leadership, or software or third-party vendor relations. It's a rinse and repeat technique that is an approach that I use and keep iterating over and over again as we strive for continuous improvement. I included this horrible screenshot. I just say horrible because you can't see it very well. And my intent is that you cannot read it, but I just wanted to show the density of this site. And this screenshot is only just a third of the length of this site that scrolls on and on. So I want to kind of describe this to you and paint a picture in your mind. It has a little bit of text at the top and a whole lot of charts. Under the hood of this site, there's a data feed from a statistics program. And every day the new case counts refreshes charts to report the COVID-19 case counts and transmission rates. And this is a long list of charts. There are charts for 6 San Francisco Bay Area counties, plus 16 other California counties and regions, plus the 50 United States and the District of Columbia. That's a total of over 70 charts on this site. As I mentioned in the site's disclaimer, this is not an official UCSF website. However, the site owners are affiliated with UCSF, and if there are barriers to content, it could reflect poorly on UCSF's reputation. A little bit of background to set the stage. The story begins while I was out of the office for a few vacation days last June. I had no idea the site existed until my return. And the characters in the story are Kirsten, who makes a one-time appearance in the story as the person who announces the site on Twitter. Next is Kelly, the main character. He is the screen reader user who encounters a barrier to the content. And Lee, the website owner, and Alex, a medical student who is Lee's volunteer developer. And then, of course, there's me in my consultant role to Lee and Alex. Let's see Kirsten's tweet announcing the site. She announced the site of this public-facing COVID-19 site on Twitter last summer on June 15th, and the tweet reads, "Want to know the up-to-date reproduction number for the coronavirus in California regions or states in the US? Our outstanding UCSF modelers Lee Warden and Travis Porco have a great new website. Check it out, ca-covid-r.info. California, the pandemic is not over." That very same day, on June 15th, the dialogue about the site started on Twitter. Kelly replied to Kirsten with the following tweet. "Any chance you all could work on making the site a bit more accessible? Tried with several screen readers used by people who are blind, and no data seems to be read. can provide more details if someone reached out to me. If you're new to accessibility, be aware that charts can be problematic for screen reader users who cannot see the charts and rely on this text-to-speech assistive technology called a screen reader to hear what they cannot see. Basically, screen reader technology reads aloud the content of the screen in a synthesized computer voice so that the user can hear the content. And if you're not familiar with screen readers, they are just one variety of all the many types of assistive technology available. So meanwhile, like I said, I was on PTO. I was doing a staycation at home with nowhere to go while this exchange is happening on Twitter, and I'm trying to stay off social media. So when I came back to work, I came back to an overflowing email box. And one of those emails was from a member of my UCSF Digital Accessibility Committee who told me this was happening on Twitter. I have to admit, I did not look at Twitter during my time off, so I had no idea about the site that had been mentioned on Twitter or that someone had encountered a barrier. I want to pause for a moment and have you ask yourself, what's your mindset when you receive feedback? What emotions do you feel? Are you defensive? Are you embarrassed? Do you feel overwhelmed? Annoyed? Scared? This is how I felt. At first, I was overwhelmed in general after just returning from a few days off. You know the feeling when you come back to an overflowing email inbox with many new to-do items. I was also a little bit scared after all this was playing out on the public stage of Twitter with some big names from UCSF. And even though the site is not an official UCSF site, like I said before, this could reflect poorly on UCSF's reputation. It was also a little bit overwhelming because I never know how that site owner may react when I approach them for a consultation about their website. Nevertheless, I had one positive feeling. I was excited to embrace the opportunity to help remove barriers to content, to help somebody who took the time to reach out. It's the right thing to do. Always be ready to engage in dialogue when a user reaches out to you and reports a barrier. It can happen at any time during the life cycle of your website. Accessibility is part of usability, and user experience by definition is a feedback-driven discipline. So embrace that opportunity to engage with your users. Feedback is golden. It provides an opportunity for improvement. But remember, there are many reasons a user might not reach out. For example, they might flee the site and never come back. Many users with disabilities may not want to self-identify, and they may not have the bandwidth or the interest beyond initial contact to help us make it better. It's not their job to help us improve our sites. Overall, my interpretation that the tweet from Kelly showed a willingness to engage in conversation. So that was a positive aspect of what was starting to happen. And Lee's tweet reads, "Thank you, we'll work on it." I was happy to see that Lee had replied on Twitter on June 16th, the very next day after Kelly had made his request. It was brief, but it acknowledged Kelly's request. Part of my job at UCSF is to reach out to the website owners when I'm made aware of online content barriers to provide awareness and accessibility guidance on how to move forward. I knew I had to have an important conversation with the site owner who I had never worked with before, and I never know how they are going to react. I did a little bit of detective work before I reached out to Lee and checked out the site to verify the barriers to the content. One of the many tools that I use in my toolbox for accessibility, the first go-to one for this site was the free Wave tool from WebAIM. It's just one of the many tools, like I said, that's in my accessibility toolbox. And here's a friendly reminder about automated testing tools. They only get you so far. So learn to check with a keyboard and learn about other manual checks that you can do. Sure enough, the Wave evaluation tool flagged all the data graphs I mentioned earlier as missing alternative text. And that verified what Kelly, our screen reader, had said, that he could not gain access to this very important public health data about COVID-19. I feel that having these automated testing tools helps back up a user's claim when I go to talk to the site owner. So I reached out to Lee and he agreed to meet to discuss the issue and requested that we include Alex, his medical student volunteer coder. The important conversations and dialogues were underway. When I connected with Lee to discuss the site, I was thrilled to hear about Lee's longstanding commitment to accessibility. And Alex, the coder, said that he was interested in learning more about accessibility and incorporating it into the website. The interaction with Lee and Alex was very positive. Sometimes I encounter resistance with site owners, but Lee and Alex sincerely wanted to put in the effort to make their COVID-19 data accessible to Kelly and other screen reader users. This leads to our conversation about good faith efforts, the second component of this mindset. Good faith efforts are needed throughout the life cycle of a site. That's because accessibility is not a one and done. It's not a checklist, it's a process, kind of like a puppy project. So take responsibility for site like you would take responsibility for a new puppy that you adopt. Monitor your site throughout its life cycle. And just like the puppy, you can't forget to feed it and care for it. Stay committed to your site and be able to show gradual progress on making the site more accessible. We're not looking for perfection, we're looking for better. And we are looking for progress. Alex, Lee, and I reviewed other potential issues in addition to the missing alternative text. And here's the list of efforts Lee and Alex identified to put into place. So we agreed these were the good faith efforts that we would start with. First one is provide alternative text for all the graphs per Kelly's request. Second, make the table machine readable with properly marked up table headers and rows. Third, ensure keyboard navigation. This is important for those that do not use a mouse. We did this manual check together over a Zoom session and realized this needed to be on the roadmap. And fourth, they wanted to provide downloadable .csv files as an alternative method to the data in the graphs. CSV stands for comma separated values, and that means the comma separate is used to separate the values of the data. And because CSV is a cross-platform file, a user can open this file as a spreadsheet in Microsoft Excel or to program numbers on a Mac. Once the changes were made, the conversation continued on Twitter. On July 7th, Leah reached out to Kelly on Twitter and asked him to take a look at the improvements. I want to highlight that the time from Kelly's original request to a fix was 23 days, and I consider that pretty responsive. There was a holiday thrown in there between mid-June and early July. And Lee's tweet reads, "Hi, following up on this issue, we've updated the website in hopes of making it work better with screen readers. Alternative text attributes on the images, some machine readable tables, and downloadable CSV files. Would you be willing to see if it's better?" That very same day, Kelly replied and confirmed his overall experience had improved. His tweet reads, "Thank you for taking the time to do this. Definitely improved. Small considerations might be eliminate the repeated there are over and over in the alt text, but what you've done already is good for this sort of resource. Thank you again for being responsive and stay safe." So we celebrated that Kelly's screen reader assistive technology can now successfully access the content. And as you noticed in this tweet, the conversation continued. Kelly provided another small consideration. And since there are over 70 graphs on the site, the repetitive phrase, "there are," read aloud for every graph can get to be a little bit tiresome. So there's always room for improvement, right? And so a roadmap was created. The roadmap is the third component of this mindset, and it's your plan to incorporate continuous improvement for your site. If you've never created a roadmap before, start by keeping it simple. Don't overthink it. Make it actionable. Think of what else you can do now, in the near future, and what might need to wait until later, and document it. Sometimes the improvements require resources such as time, training, or money. Identify these, and when the resources become available, tackle the documented items. If you're familiar with the software development lifecycle, you might use tools like Trello or Jira with tickets to capture customers' requests and other work items. A website's roadmap helps prioritize fixes you find from your automated and manual testing methodologies or issues reported to you by users. This leads us to the roadmap for this particular site. This one contained these future improvements. What could easily be done right away? Sometimes this is referred to as low-hanging fruit. So first on the list was to make the data table accessible, also known as creating a machine-readable table. This includes applying row and column headers in HTML. When the proper HTML markup is in place, users of screen readers can navigate through the data tables one cell at a time, and they will hear the column and the row headers spoken to them, so they don't lose place of where they are in a mass of data. And second on that list was an interim plan to reprogram the automatically generated alt text to avoid repetition of the phrase "there are" for every county and region's graph, as mentioned by Kelly. And finally, Lee and Alex wanted to eventually move from HTML4 to HTML5 for better support of presenting this alternative text. I recommend you revisit the roadmap as often as possible as part of your good faith efforts. These good faith efforts and a documented roadmap will go a long way if there should ever be something horrible as somebody bringing a lawsuit against your site. It's so much better to have this in place. Like I said, we're not looking for perfection, but if you can show that you've got good faith efforts and documentation, and you're not claiming ignorance, and you're not saying you don't care, that this is much better and will help your case in court. So the roadmaps can always change. And these are a couple things that might influence the changes in your roadmap, such as new technology, new funding becomes available to bring on additional staff or upgrade your tools, new knowledge and skills are acquired, workflows are revised as you learn to work smarter and better and understand your users' needs, or if another user speaks out. So remember, different users access the web in different ways. And just because one user says it works for them doesn't mean it's accessible now and that you can check accessibility off your list. It's a continuous cycle. As I said before, other users might identify different barriers, and the process starts again with the dialogue, the good faith efforts, and the roadmap for continuous improvement. In conclusion, my passion is to advocate for the user, and I hope my story gave you some ideas for how to take action to increase customer satisfaction when a user notifies you about a barrier to content in your website. We want to remove barriers to ultimately provide a better user experience. It can be overwhelming, but starting somewhere is better than doing nothing. You can find me on Twitter at Jill, Jill_Wolters, WOLTERS, and on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/in/Jill-Wolters. And these are the related links. And I'd like to open it up to any questions. Donna?
Jill, thank you so much. This has been really a great story and a great understanding of how people, go through the whole process, especially in a public thing like this. People only see bits and pieces, and to understand the full story is really, really enlightening. So thank you. You mentioned that you never know how a site owner is going to respond if you raise a concern. Are there any strategies that you already are employing, using to make that process a little easier and maybe a little less strenuous, I guess, or stressful?
Right. Yeah. It can be really stressful because a lot of times, these are big name people working at the university in healthcare, and um, I'm tucked away in web services in IT, and I'm not at the hospitals that often, or the clinics. And so it is intimidating. And I'd say what I do is the carrot approach versus the stick, because I have other people that can carry that stick. And so my personality is to be more kind and just to reach out and say, hey, there's something going on. I'm here to help you. I can consult with you. I might not have the exact answer, but we can find a way, and I can help guide you to some resolution for that user. And so, like I said, yeah, sometimes it is scary before you reach out. But in this particular story, they were like, "Oh yeah, let's hop on a Zoom call and let's start talking about it because we want to do the right thing." And then, there are times when people are saying like, nope, leadership wants this out right now. We're going to make it public. Yeah, there's risk. And I come back in again. I'm like, okay, money. Do you want to spend money on a lawsuit, or do you want to spend some money and resources and time now and try and make it better? And when we talk about risk and strategies to mitigate risk, they um, they warm up a little bit. I can't say everyone is like, oh yes, that's right, let's do that. That I do run into resistance, and that's when I pull out folks that have a stick. Like my boss and I, he's like, you're the good cop, I'm the bad cop. And then we also have a legal counsel, and we also have a risk management department that can also back us up.
Oh, that's awesome that you're so supportive. And I love that your approach starts with empathy of, this is where we need to go, and just it's a beautiful approach. On a more technical side, I noticed that you mentioned, and I personally love Wave too. It's fantastic for those quick automated checks on a page. But what other tools are your kind of go-tos in your toolbox? Understanding that, I'll repeat your disclaimer, you can't check it all with the automated testing. But with that, it is definitely helpful, especially if you are building that empathy with someone who's not familiar with it. So what are some of your go-tos?
I'd say I've got quite a lot of browser plugins beyond Wave. Um, there's a site improve checker that I'll also look, because you compare and contrast them, and you'll find that maybe one shows you color contrast issues in a better way or a more understandable way to you. And I'll do manual checks with the keyboard. I also use the color contrast analyzer tool that's free. Um, so I'm always showing and sharing things that are free with people first. And then, we're lucky at UCSF, well, actually at the University of California, we have a full enterprise version of Site Improve here. But yeah, like there's so much out there that we can rely on and look to, because there's not one that solves every issue.
Here I am chattering with the mute on. Wonderful, thank you. With that, in terms of testing, we all have heard before that, sometimes the most, well, obviously in this case, it was through Twitter, the user testing is going to get you the most details. Is there any pointers you have or experiences you have trying to ask and obviously compensate, but ask native users to be a part of the process?
Yeah, we were with a shoestring budget. This is what we did. We had a consultant who was a blind screen reader user, and I host office hours for digital accessibility topics every month. And before COVID hit and there was some budget cuts, he would come in every other month, and we would notify folks that he was coming, and kind of like a first come first serve basis. He could read your website, and we would tell them a little bit about the basics of user testing, as in Mark's not going to just read your pages word by word. This is going to be a little bit tedious, so he'll go through the navigation, but then can you point us to maybe a form you would like him to fill out, or maybe a data table, something a little more complex than just text and images. And I think to have him there pre-COVID, like I said, we would gather around a conference room table and he would turn on his screen reader. And of course, it's turned up to the fast speed that he normally listens to. And then he would dial it down until people could say, like, okay, I can understand where you're going now. And we would have the focus showing on the screen so the visual people could see where he was. And then, you know, things were just brought to light, as in, oh my gosh, he's not seeing that submit button on that form. And Mark's pretty technical savvy user himself. And so he would say, I just filled out a form and I'm not finding a submit button, or nothing's being read aloud to me. Am I missing something? And it'd be like, oh my gosh, yes, we need to fix that. And so it was very revealing for people to see a user take that time on their very own site that they created to show them what those barriers are. So yeah, anytime that you have the funds or the money or a friend or a colleague that is willing to do that kind of testing for you, you know, take advantage of that, because, and record it if you can too, to share. That's what we would do. We would share it for the other development group and say, hey, I know you couldn't all be there at the session, but here's where there were some barriers that he just could not access things.
Wonderful. All right. You're getting a lot of questions today. We got a few more here. Bruce was asking, there's a lot of information in the alt text for these images. Would you recommend that they all use null alt text and present the information below the image as HTML instead?
I'd say you need to weigh that. I don't tell the developers exactly how to do it and let them make some decisions, but with over 70 different charts, that was the way that they wanted to do it. And because it was also, like I said, a statistical data feed through the chart, that they what they thought was to hear, you know, there are 70 cases in the county of Marin. There are 70 cases in the county of San Francisco. So I would, you know, it's a fine balance between what you want your visual users to see and also what you need to provide for assistive technology users.
Absolutely. Definitely. That's a great point. Curtis made a point to say that Site Improve Accessibility Checker is also an extension, is temporarily unavailable in the Chrome Web Store. But I think you were talking about the enterprise version.
Yeah, actually, I was talking about both. We have the enterprise version at the University of California, which is great to scan a complete website. And then I also do use the Site Builder Chrome browser extension. And I know they stopped putting it in the Firefox store, but I thought it was still available for Chrome. And if it's not, I've got it. and you know, I just used it this morning. So I'd say reach out to Site Improve and ask them about that.
All right. Wonderful insights and direction there. I think we only have one other, and it was about the roadmap. I love this idea of just creating that piece, but can you tell our audience a little bit about what some maybe typical speed bumps that might be found along the way are?
Yeah, I'd say, yeah, as you travel down your road with your roadmap, some of the bumps might be when resources become scarce, when developers get pulled to other projects, or funding gets cut, or staffing gets cut. It's basically losing some of those resources, and you might have to pivot too, or maybe you move from one version of your content management system to another and your focus goes there. So, you know, we're all being pulled in different directions as we try to travel down our roadmap. And that's why I say, you know, be flexible and know it will change. It's always great to, even if things change or pivot, still keep those items in mind. So when you can return to them, if they're not resolved with some kind of new technology or a new workflow, you can go back and revisit those.
Wonderful. We have 3 more questions. This is absolutely fantastic. Thank you all, everyone out there. Thank you for being so engaged. This is awesome. All right. So Adrian said, can you talk about the importance or significance of staying in touch and engaged with various people and accessibility communities on Twitter? Do you think it's important to stay active there and keep an eye out?
I think it's a personal preference. I am not on Twitter all the time. And so I'm more on LinkedIn, and that's where I engage more with the accessibility committee or community. And I'd like a little bit of clarification if that was engaging with other users or if it was engaging with accessibility peers, that question.
I think it was the idea of, I got the impression, and Adrian, please feel free to say something if I'm incorrect, but it was that working outside of our bubbles kind of thing and staying aware of both the challenges that individuals are raising and solutions or potential roadblocks in the communities as well.
Yes, stay engaged. Their WebAIM, I know I mentioned them before, WEBAIM. AIM stands for Accessibility in Mind. Subscribe to their newsletter. They're a nonprofit. They have great how-to instructions. That's another tool I refer people to all over and over again as they start learning about accessibility. In the Bay Area, we've got a lot of wonderful meetups about accessibility and inclusion. And now with COVID-19, they've been opening those up to people from across the country. And so that's one way I stay engaged. And then that network that I launched earlier this year, co-founded with Suzanne Levine, that's a monthly session that we do specifically for government and higher ed. We love our meetups in the Bay Area, but a lot of them have vendors and high-powered corporations. So I'm thinking of, like LinkedIn or Google, Workday. These companies have big accessibility teams, and we find in higher ed and in government, sometimes it's just a one-person shop. And so that's kind of my case. So that's how I stay engaged.
That's fantastic. Kevin made a note to say having a live demo from a screen reader user makes such a huge difference. I did this for our app developer years ago, and it has had a huge impact. That actually leads me to my my personal question is, we've been talking a lot about screen readers and visual challenges, but cognitive challenges, anything from ASD to ADHD, there's mobility issues, there's auditory challenges. What are some of the things we can do to really make sure we're having that kind of inclusion as well?
Yeah, for the auditory piece, have captions on your videos, have captions available during your live events. You can do that again on a shoestring budget. When COVID-19 hit, some of the trainings that I did on a regular basis in person, I recorded it. And I'm not an AV expert by any means. So, I used the YouTube function where I could upload my video and it would crank out the captions. I don't mean to disparage Facebook, YouTube, but sometimes they're called craptions because sometimes a little bit of crap gets in the way. And so when you download it, do your due diligence and read through that and make the edits and fix the words that might not have been picked up correctly. And so then you've got a captioned video, you've got a transcript, and that transcript can be used by people with cognitive disabilities or people with just different learning styles. I've had people tell me, I took your transcript and brought it into Word and did my highlighting there and put in my own little notes and expanded on what you had provided. And there's another big name in the accessibility area, Derek Featherstone. One of his presentations a few years ago at a conference was was about some of these other different types of disabilities like ADHD. And so he said, do you remember Dory from the film Finding Nemo and how she was always distracted? And he said, keep that kind of persona in mind as you create your site. Or think of Andre the Giant with a great big hand, and for the call to action buttons on your phone, make those a little bit bigger so his finger will hit that specific button that he needs. So I liked how he talked about extremes, using characters that we all know to illustrate these other types of disabilities beyond just low vision, no vision, and auditory. Oh, and one thing I'd like to mention too, like I said, when I saw that COVID-19 site and all those charts, and I have vision, I wear glasses, so a little bit of a disability there, but I was overwhelmed because I'm also not a data person. And I was just like, oh my gosh, what is this site? And, it took me a while to kind of comprehend, and like, oh, wow, chart for every county. Wow. Moving from Colorado to California with so many other counties, it's like a lot of information. I see they have to, they want to give all that data, but it can be overwhelming.
Absolutely. Well, and I love the fact that you mentioned the learning styles. I'll admit I'm the one who looks for the transcripts too. I get impatient listening to a video sometimes. I probably shouldn't say that hosting a video series here, but it's the truth. So I love the fact that you can do that. So what do you consider to be the next steps for any of our listeners or viewers here at home?
Yeah, I'd say for those that are beginners, well, really, whatever skill level that you're at, take baby steps so you're not overwhelmed. If there was anything that I mentioned in this conversation of keywords that you weren't familiar with, start doing a little research. Find some of the great communities that are out there if you work better as far as wanting to just reach out to talk to somebody, or just to, being on the WebAIM mail list means you can just kind of not participate if you're not comfortable doing that yet, or if you're so new you're not sure what are the right questions to ask. You can start seeing what other people ask and how other people respond, and through those connections and meetups, you'll start to hear a lot of the same themes over and over again, and you'll find out who are the big speakers and the big names in the accessibility community, and that can lead you down so many paths to other vendors that can help you with your issues. And I think just in general, the accessibility community is everybody's very nice. Everyone is has a big heart. Everybody wants to do the right thing, and it's a nice piece of the overall technology career.
That is a beautiful way to end this off. Thank you so much, Jill. And thank you everyone for submitting all those notes and questions. This has been a hearty discussion, and we really appreciate all of you taking the time, Jill, especially for coming in and sharing your thoughts and perspectives. We're so grateful. So everyone, if you're needing to check this out later, don't forget to subscribe on YouTube. Check us out on Twitter, #A11yTalks if you have any questions. And otherwise, have a fantastic weekend, and we'll see you next month. Stay tuned for our next session that we'll be announcing in the next few weeks.
Thanks.
Bye now. All right, it's been more than 10 seconds. I think we're safe. I know, right? I'm really hoping that part is